Welcome to the Tapestry of Life. I am Dr. Pascal Scholes, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services at Community College of Philadelphia. Today's topic is domestic violence. What makes victims stay? I want to welcome back my co-host, Renee Norris-Jones, who is also a survivor, Lori Hendrickson, Clinical Director of Women Against Abuse, and Dee Hargrove, affectionately known as Dee, an LGBT community activist. Dee is a lesbian who disclosed that fact that she was a batterer. She also plays a batterer in a recent screen of the film Crazy, Cool, Sexy at the Ritz Theater. The film won several awards in the Winter Queer Fest. Well, we have a celebrity. What can I tell you?
Thank you.
I was wondering, this is a kind of an interesting topic, a little bit more interesting than we usually have, because not only are we talking about the survivors, but we're also talking about someone who was a batterer and the clinical implications of all that. So I was wondering, maybe Renee, as the co-host, you can kind of get us started.
Well, as a survivor, one of the number one question that I'm always asked, and this is 35 years later, is why did you stay?
Mm-hmm. No
one has ever asked why did he do all those horrific things to you, but it's why did she stay? Since the recent NFL, with Ray Rice, the outreaches that I've done, I've had more people come up to the table and engage in conversation, which is the silver lining that folks are talking about it. But the comments that I'm still getting is, but she married him afterwards. Oh, she was in it for the money. So it's still victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
So
True.
I really think, and I thought about Dee. I thought that Dee would be a great guest for this show because her mantra is own it, don't condone it.
Yes.
And I think that it's important to have that full circle conversation.
Yeah, that's what I think unique about today's session, and the fact that we've had, I think, 2 shows now on
Yes.
domestic issues, but never had the opportunity to have someone come forward like you are and talk to the topic that's particularly interesting to lots. And I think it has gotten a lot of play lately because of all of the NFL stories and things that are going on. And I was always kind of shocked by the fact that when she got knocked out, Ray Rice's, I guess, the girlfriend at the time, fiance, how supportive she was, and you start to say, well, what's going on here?
Right.
I mean, where you can get a knockout punch in an elevator and still love the man. Mm-hmm. You wonder, and that's the whole topic.
Right, and what I say to people is, so you're in a marriage, everything's going fine, and all of a sudden your spouse starts drinking, they become an alcoholic. Do you pick up and leave? You're vested emotionally in this relationship. Do you just pick up and leave if they become a gambler or whatever it is? Well, not whatever it is, but in most things. Things happen. Do you try to support them? They'll say, I'm going to change, I'm going to work on it. And it's very similar in domestic violence. And I'm sure that Lori can speak to that from a clinical point of view. And when I hear the clinical explanations, I go, yep, I did that. It becomes this checklist of everything that you do, so much so that there's a pattern that happens, but you stick with them. I mean, the typical batter behavior, before I saw that it was a pattern, is they cry. I'm never going to do it again. It was a mistake. Oh my God, I love you so much. It's the flowers. It's all of the pampering.
Right. Or the honeymoon comes back.
Right,
or
right,
whatever.
exactly.
The
honeymoon
stage comes back.
So in your experience, Dee, how did that play out in your relationships?
Well, I mean, basically, when you say as far as like the pampering, the flowers and everything, I did all that, very much so. But how it played out in my relationships, I mean, I was just the main dominant party in my relationship. I mean, that's how I created it. And that's also what I was groomed into as far as when I came out at 19. I hung around other lesbian women that were, butch females, or what they call it, or stud. Tomboyish, whatever, and they told me, like, a butch is supposed to be this, that, and the third, you have to run your household, you have to bring in the money and stuff like that. And when I was coming out at 19, and I was going to Westchester University at the time, studying my undergrad in communications, and I would come down to the city. I actually met a girl in college. She was like 1 year under me, and she exposed me to various gay clubs here. And that started my coming out process, actually, because I felt pretty comfortable in those clubs and in those scenes. But the one scene that I did see my first time going to a gay club, I saw at the end when everybody was, they call it the let out, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all used to clubs, stop playing. But I know we're on TV.
Well, we know clubs.
Yeah. But, so I came out of the club and I was just hanging out with some friends on the side. And, we were just conversing and things. And, I saw the older butch lesbian female, and everybody liked her. She was pretty popular. And she came out and she walked over to her car. She was yelling. She was cursing. She was screaming, talking about her girlfriend. And I believe somebody approached her girlfriend, tried to dance with her, talk to her. I don't know. But she did go to her car and she grabbed a machete, actually, that she had in the vehicle. And she came back to the club. I couldn't believe it. And, she was like, I'm going to kill her, this, that, and the third. And then other times I've been to certain clubs and, over the years, they're not around, a lot of them anymore, but there was domestic violence, right outside the club. Mm-hmm. And that was just things that I took with me, not saying that I was trying to be like those people, but then it was like they were looked up to. Those women still stayed. I saw them at the next party with the same girl that tried to cut you, hit you, whatever, that did hit you outside that club. So then the friends of mine, they told me, this is what the butch is supposed to be. This is, this, that, and the third. And, I kind of felt pressured under that. Also, my family background, like I said, I come from an awesome family, like the Huxtables, but then the Huxtables also probably had their own stuff too. You know what I mean? Right. Just like any other family. Yeah. And, my father and mother are still together after 46 years. And, but my father, he used to chastise us in regards to, and let me not even put it lightly, he used to beat us and then afterwards told us, I beat you because I loved you. You know what I mean? That whole upbringing thing. That's how they were raised. You don't talk back, stuff like that. I remember one time I grew up in Mount Airy, East Mount Airy actually, and I was sitting on a step, a next door neighbor's step, and I was just sitting there. I wasn't doing anything. Maybe about 6 or 7, maybe 8 or whatever. Just sitting on the step.
8 o'clock or?
Oh, no, age. I'm sorry, my
Okay.
age.
7 or 8.
Yeah,
Okay.
like 6, 7, or 8 or so. I'm sitting just on the step, nice day out, all that. My dad calls me in, I come inside, and he put the belt to me immediately. Like, no questions, no nothing. It was just, grabbed my arm, everything. And I really didn't understand, like, what was going on. And that's also the problem, is that there was no like real communication, you know what I mean? It was just like, that's it. You're getting a beating and you're not telling me anything. So then over the years, I thought about those things and I said, was that abuse or was that just chastising? And, I got confused, and then, my sister, I was the baby of the family, 5 years younger than my sister. And one time she babysat me, beat me with a hanger. Once again, what is this about? You know what I mean? Did you learn this from daddy or did you learn this from watching, how we were raised? But going into adulthood and relationships and, interacting with other, with females, taking that experience as a child, taking that experience as what is a butch supposed to be and, the whole cultural part or whatever of my lifestyle, I created these control patterns, like you said, the patterns, because not just the victims have the patterns, the batter has the pattern, those patterns, and it's like, and then also it was the financial abuse, a financial burden, I should say, of holding down my household by myself with an unemployed partner, and then I felt as though that she could have done more to help out.
Yeah, Dee, I want to ask you a question. You conceptualize the battering through the example of your life experience as a gay person.
Yes.
But if I close my eyes, I think I can hear that in the straight world too. Yes. Almost the exact same story. So although I think it's conceptualized a certain way, would you agree? I'm asking you. I'm just thinking for me, those stories could just be a more traditional relationship culturally,
Right.
and the battering is the same. It just gets conceptualized different because of your life experience. Would you think that makes sense?
Yes, I mean, the thing about it is gay, straight, black, white,
Yeah.
male, female, even female on female, male on male, or female on male, because a lot of times that demographic is left out.
About
Females
15%.
battering, males. There you
Yeah,
said
about
15%,
15%.
and,
Right.
and it's probably more than that.
Yeah.
And I have observed, and I have male friends, and straight male friends, gay male friends, and I have all kinds of friends. Let's just put it like that. And I've talked to some of my male counterparts where I've actually felt pretty bad when I would speak to them, because they would say, I would never hit a woman, like, but she constantly is hitting on me. Or if I want to walk away, she's throwing something at me. If I walk away, or if I come in the house late or whatever from work, she's thinking that I was out with someone else and I was just working for our family. And she's cursing me out. I mean, I have a brother of mine, he's like a play brother, we grew up together. And I felt so bad for him one night when he called me and he said, like, she locked me out the house. And it was cold out and everything, could you come get me? Because the girlfriend was drunk. The girlfriend thought he was out with someone else. And she started hitting on him. And he said, I had to leave. I'd rather be out here in the cold than hit her.
Sure.
Oh,
good.
So on that note, did that ring any truth in you,
yeah.
what you were doing?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, every day, I'm reminded of, the shame and the guilt. Every single day.
Okay.
And God has an amazing way of throwing those signs at me. I'll be at a water ice stand and I heard two guys when I was getting some water. I love water ice, okay? I'm a Philly girl, remember that. But I was grabbing some water ice and I heard two guys sitting there talking about Ray Rice. And they were like, man, I don't know what's wrong with these guys nowadays, and they were older. They looked like maybe in their 40s. And so from a different era. And, they were just like, they need to go get some help or just roll out. I don't even understand that kind of behavior, and I don't understand the women either. And it was just awesome just to hear two guys talk about that, like, have that open discussion about how they were against it. They were advocates for being against domestic violence.
So it was the Ray Rice that was recent. How did that resonate in you, even though it's been some time for it?
Well, I mean, it was even, I was compared to Ray Rice on Facebook by my ex-girlfriend, who I actually bantered. And it made me cry, honestly. It was like, at first I was enraged, but then I had to own it, not condone it. Like you stated that, what I said at a motivational speaking at Drexel University. Sure. That's something what I told those students, and I had to, but I needed to see that post. I needed to see that discussion thread. She actually talked about Ray Rice. And then, the comments came and she was like, that's crazy and this, that, and the third. And what do you guys, she likes to start those kind of discussions. And I applaud her for that, putting her therapy, that's her way of doing therapy because of being a victim. But comments came and then all of a sudden I read the comments and then she had commented back to her cousin. And because her cousin didn't know that she was abused, and she was like, yeah, my ex-girlfriend used to abuse me. And, one day I've actually we had a hookah, and what happened was the glass base. One day we were arguing Sunday morning, and I was upset, and I pulled her braid. Never pull a black woman's braid. I'm just going to put that out there, okay? Because she had braids in her hair, and they were freshly done, and I pulled just one of the braids. She took the hookah, the base of it, and she hit me upside my head. All this leaked of blood. And I had to get staples in my head and everything. But the sad thing is she got locked up for it. Oh. The victim got locked up. I wasn't. I was asked questions. They wanted me to come to court to press charges and to get her put in jail for a while. And I couldn't do it, and I was so ashamed. Yeah. And so when I saw that comment, and then she did outline it on that comment thread about what happened that day, it was like, wow. So what I did was, in response, I actually responded. And my cousin is friends with her, too. Some of my family members don't even know. And I put it out there, and I said, I'm the one that she's speaking about in this thread. And I apologize, and I feel guilt and shamed every day. But this is a topic that needs to be openly discussed, and I'm going to be the person to start it and admit.
Yeah. Well, Lori, this must sound familiar, working with women against abuse. It's almost like the story is something you, I assume, hear a lot. Is that? I'm going to get you into this discussion, you know what I mean, Laura?
Absolutely. Got you. Yes. Yeah. I'm hearing so much from you right now, taking all of that in. Courageous for you to speak up about what you're speaking up about, which a lot of people can't do, or they're not in that place yet where they're able to do that.
Right.
I know we were talking about earlier just in terms of the, why can't people leave? You've already addressed that. You've both addressed it in many ways. What we haven't, I think, exactly gone back to say is that that's the hardest time for people, that the safety
Most difficult, the
makes
most
it
dangerous time.
very, very difficult, right?
You mean when
The
you
time
decide to
when you
leave.
decide
Right.
to
I've heard
go,
that one,
Right.
yeah.
that's the most dangerous time. So that, you have to kind of go back to that to say that's one thing. And the other really, really basic thing is, where do you go?
Yeah.
Where do you go? Like, there's a lack of resources.
Yes.
There's supports. Who's gonna take you in where your abuser doesn't know where you are, where you're gonna be safe. So those two things alone, we can kind of assume that I just want to put them out there,
Right.
because there's all the other reasons. Like, there's so many reasons.
Right. It's not just sometimes a physical location of where you're going. It's, does your family support this? I know when I was going through it, I went to my father, and I am the youngest of 6 girls, with 7 kids total. And I was daddy's little girl. And at some point, I remember showing up at his doorstep, and I had black eyes, just everything was just all bloody. And I went
Why
in,
did
and
you
I
stay
was,
with all that happening? I mean, I'm curious, because at the show, why would you stay after? I mean, I know clinically
Right.
why, but I'm just.
so, but here's the thing. I was always daddy's little girl. That was my hero. So I showed up at his doorstep, and he knew this was going on. And I remember just going in and just breaking down. I actually snuck away because my husband had left the apartment. Do not eat anything while I'm gone. Do not touch anything. Removed all the food. And it was maybe after day 3 or 4 of not eating, I went to my dad's house. And which I was brutally beat for that afterwards when I went home. But my dad looked at me and said, "What did you think marriage was?" So I'm 18 years old at this point,
Yeah.
because I'm married young. What did you think? So I have society telling me that this is okay. I have family telling me this.
That's okay to be beaten.
That it's okay. So your father's telling you this. I mean, at some point I went to, well, my family members will call me. I have 6 older sisters, and some of them are 20, 19, 20, and 18, 19, 20 years older. So they're much older. And I would get a phone call to say, I know you're staying at that shelter place, which was the domestic violence shelter. You should come over and get a home-cooked meal. And I would go there, and there's an extra plate on the table. 2 seconds later, there's a knock on the door. It's my husband.
Wow.
You guys need to work this out. You stay with your marriage. And he's at the front door. He called us crying on the phone. So you have the resources. I mean, even though when I went through it, the shelter maybe had 8, 9, 10 beds. So I know that when you're beat down like that, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it takes courage. And it takes opportunity. Because the most danger time is when you're leaving. If they get a whiff that you're leaving, they're going to beat the hell out of you.
Oh, okay.
So it's courage and opportunity. It's getting that up to go, I'm going to do this. There was a speaker at iPledge last year, Women Against Abuse, and the speaker was a hotline worker. And she did a skit, and it was called The Hardest Piece of My Job. This was last year. So the skit was, ring, ring, this is operator number 99. She's playing the woman's voice to say, I'm in this domestic violence relationship, tell me about it. And they explore all of her options. They give her a safety plan. And she said, the hardest part of my job was to say, there's no space. This was last year. Philadelphia has 1.5 million people. Up until a few months ago, we had one shelter with 100 beds. And even though we have 200 beds now,
And they're all filled up
they're all filled up.
already. And it just opened
right,
the
so
second shelter.
the hotline takes, and I believe it's like over 11,000 calls for women needing services. And when folks say, why do you stay? We have to look at the resources that are
Absolutely.
available.
I agree.
So
For a
part-
city this, size, we have, our resources don't compare to other cities. So where are these women going to go as far as the domestic violence shelter? What's society giving them? When that video first came out with Ray Rice, it was okay until people saw the punch. Why do you have to see the punch?
Right.
Sure.
So
Where do the
it's
batteries go to?
it's the mindset of society, if they're saying you stay there, this is okay.
Yeah.
You stay in that marriage. The foundation of marriage is bigger than this. So it's a lot why, and I'm sure Lori can speak to this more, why a woman stays, but that's a big piece of it. You're in this thing, and I mean, it almost takes me back to slavery in America. You know, this is something that's wrong, but it's legal. Folks are saying this is what you do. Oh, yeah, it's horrific. We're going to turn the other way. We're not going to look, but it's okay.
I believe there's I'm a social worker, and, it's crazy because I try to be, I've worked in mental health as well, and I tried to be my own therapist, my own social worker at the same time, and I had to be because of the lack of resources.
Sure.
When I finally owned it and when I wanted to get that outreach, I did my research, I did my homework, and being a social worker, I wasn't making as much, but it's definitely a fulfilling profession. But the problem is that when I did reach out to Menergy, and there's nothing, I have nothing against any agency whatsoever, but Menergy was pretty expensive when I called and
Tell
I
them
did.
what Menergy is. 'Cause I
Menergy
know
is
what it is.
actually a group located in Chestnut Hill, Germantown area that help out with anger management and domestic violence therapeutic services. And I believe they may have other services. I don't want to just
But they
limit
offer
them.
counseling for batterers.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Menergy definitely popped up in Google search, and I called them, but it was like $80 to $100 per session, and it was a lot. And I really could not afford it. And I felt bad too, because I was like, if you really want the help, you'll do what you have to. If you can go out for a drink on a Saturday night or whatever every week, which costs, or the movies, you can go there. But it just really didn't work out for me budget wise. And through my health insurance, through the agency I was working for, I did find a therapist or what have you. So I went to that therapist for a while. And then, sometimes it was just like, oh, I'm good now. I haven't been doing this for a month. It's just like a drug addict or anything, you know what I mean? Or alcoholic, you think, you put it down for like a week and you're good, or a month. And you still have to get that consistent everyday, therapy. I definitely needed it either way. So yeah, the lack of resources is definitely not. It's not as present or prevalent for victims nor batterers. You can find more methadone clinics in a little bit though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and something that I said in reference to family support. Did you share with anyone that you were battering, close friends or anyone?
I'm trying to remember. My friends definitely. My friends knew.
And how
family
did they,
wise.
did they condone it? Did they? Have,
Oh yeah, they definitely, said, you really need to, stop, point blank. My friends were straight up with me, but they also were, when they would hear the, how the argument started or whatever, it was like, well, she should have never did that and stuff like that. So it was, they still were on my side, being my friends. But I always would be honest, like I am today. I just always would tell people it's two sides to a story. She's not here, because I would tell them I feel so bad. And, they would say, it's going to be all right, it's going to be okay. But, I also needed more of that harshness. But when you were stating in regards to like the family condoning it and stuff, my grandmother was abused a whole lot by my grandfather. And, I'll never forget that time when all us women were in the kitchen and, we were having a good time. She's from the West Coast, actually, from Tacoma. And she was here out of town. And my grandfather was here with her, and they have their marital issues and all kinds of stuff. But my grandfather was downstairs, and she was running up and down the stairs, like getting his plate and making it, and then taking it to him, and then like maybe 20 minutes later go back down, make sure he's done with it, let me go get it. And we were just like, why don't you sit down, relax? And she's just like, well, you guys will learn one day when you get older, because she was also in denial of my homosexuality. You guys will learn one day that's what you're supposed to do for your husband, whether you have a good or bad marriage, you still have to hang in there and do what you got to do. And we already knew her past with him. He was an alcoholic and constantly beat her. And he
did
beat
you
my
ever
mom.
witness that abuse as a child?
No, I did not. My grandmother lived more on the West Coast, and they were traveling all over the world because he was in the Army.
I never really gave it a whole lot of thought, but listening to both of you, I never thought that the abuse could very clearly, the reason why you stay, could be tied into the lack of resources in the community. Although my background's in social work, I think this would pop up first,
Right.
Clinically. So, and we just the Women Against Abuse just opened up another 100 bed shelter,
That's
and it
awesome.
filled up quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So part of the abuse is actually a function of the Department of whatever. I don't want to mention departments because
Right.
I'll get all kind of like letters about that. But the reality is that there's not enough sensitivity to resources, so people stay in those relationships because they really have no place to go. Is that?
That's true, and we're all afraid of change.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, it's like, I'm going to stay here because I have to go out. I'm going to lose my house, my job. I can't go back to this. You know, he's going to find me. So you know that at 5 o'clock every Thursday, he's going to beat the crap out of me.
Yeah, and you have no place to go.
Right, I have nowhere to go versus going out into the world. And where am I going to live? Where are my kids going to live? Going back to that I pledge when the worker did that little skit, this was just last year, 35 years later for me, I lost it. I was done for the day. I had all the rest of these things to do. I said, maybe I'll just go shoe shopping. That'd be good. And I said, no, this is Jamocha almond fudge, trash TV in the bed. I was done.
Sure.
Because I remembered. It took me back to being on that corner. There were no cell phones. So you had to leave the house. And sometimes with the clothes on your back.
Yeah.
And you know that when you left, you got to get back in. You got to go back in there.
Yeah, there's no place
And you
to
go to that phone. You get the courage and the opportunity. I'm ready. I can do this. And you call, and there's no space. I mean, everything. So the next time you want to leave, you're thinking about that. Well, the last time I went out, the last 7 times, the last 15 times I went out, there's been consistently no more space. So it beats you down more. It takes...
Like no one cares out
Right,
there
right,
about the
right.
topic because they don't have enough space to take
Right,
care
exactly.
of the people.
So even though the opportunity might come, you're just too tired. You're too tired to say, I got to muster up this courage. So it's that courage and opportunity playing together.
I think I think also people love a challenge. I mean, the cat and mouse.
Oh, you mean
know,
the game of abuse?
the game.
I wanna use
Some
that
people
word.
enjoy it. You know, I actually dated a female maybe before I met my current girlfriend, about a year or so ago. I met a female, and when we were intimate, she wanted me to hit her so hard. And she knew, and the thing about it is I would talk about my background, but it also definitely was held against me. Because once they knew about my background, I met one girl that knew about me being abusive and wanted it sexually. I mean,
To be abused during...
yeah, I mean, come on, we have 50 Shades of Grey about to drop. And if anybody read any of those books, it's definitely some kind of sexual, violence going on. And
Do you
some people
tie
get throws
sex
off
and
of it.
violence together? I mean, in your
Yeah, I mean,
discussions now?
I have with that one girl.
Sure, with that one
it blew my
person.
mind. I mean, and we did that. Like, she wanted to be tied up. I mean, choked, everything. And I was kind of afraid of it, but then it turned me on too, to be honest. And it was weird. Like, I mean, and then she would hit me. You know what I mean? There was no bloodshed or nothing like that, no punches. But it was sex and violence mixed. And I mean, people had thrills. And then I've talked about it with other people, and they've said they've done it as well. And they enjoy it very much.
So Lori, can you speak to that? It seems to me that that's still in a controlled, almost an acting, if you will, environment. Can you speak to that as far as how that relates to domestic violence that we know it at Women Against Abuse?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think about that we haven't talked about is how your stories talk about, like, how you were raised, what happened, what the kinds of not just values that you were taught, but the experiences that you had, and that how trauma truly does change the way our brains think. It changes a lot, and we don't know it. It's pretty insidious the way that it happens.
Yeah, I heard that yesterday, and I was just, the light bulb went off. It was like, trauma changes the brain. I know that I suffer from PTSD. I know that I have to watch what kind of exposures I do when I talk about domestic violence. I'm aware of all that, but it made sense that trauma changes the brain, which means it changes how you interact in the world.
Right, and it changes so it keeps those memories as well. So we think of like our memories being, conscious, but those memories aren't conscious. It's considered our implicit memory. So our implicit memory holds those things, and yeah, sure enough, That's what happens when there's flashbacks, when there's panic attacks. There's things that you do when you're older that you wonder, where did that come from? How did that happen? Our implicit memory is kind of like that, like to explain it more, is kind of like that thing that happens like when we learn to ride a bike, say we learn to ride, we don't think about it anymore, it just happens. Well, those are the kinds of things that as we grow up in abusive relationships, right, it stores in there, and then it's going to come back out later in different ways. It just
So how does that play into the triggering? So for me, I tell my story frequently, and I'm always aware of too much exposure, the triggering that happens, the self-care that I need to do.
Yes.
After that, so how does that brain changing the trauma, changing the brain, feed into the triggering? Does that fall into that vein as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you were saying pathways, right? So our brain has all these neurons. I mean, the brain is so complex. I'm certainly not an expert in the brain, but it's complex. And so all of these pathways are occurring. And one of the ways I heard someone describe it one time was, say it's snowing, we're snowing and we're stuck in the snow. The car is stuck in the snow and you're going back and forth, and there's people that aren't really good at getting out of the snow. I'm kind of one of them. And you just keep going back and forth in the snow, and the pathway gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're stuck there. You're going to keep getting stuck there if you just keep doing the same thing, right? We have to do something different. Like we have to figure out a different way to get out of that pathway. Otherwise it just keeps getting deeper. Same thing with trauma. Same thing with the way that we think about trauma. And we're going to keep getting triggered, because that pathway is just getting deeper and deeper. Both of you have done something to get out of that pathway, to do something different.
I was just going to ask about that. What can people do to kind of get out of that?
Yeah,
that rut, if you will, that pathway.
Exactly.
I'm trying to beat trauma. That's honestly, instead of putting my hands on a woman, I'm trying to beat up trauma. That's being frank and honest. I'm trying, like what you're stating, I'm actually trying to, being here and speaking on this subject as a batter, I'm trying to beat trauma for the victims, for the batters, for anyone, because I feel as though the things that I've taught some of my clients in social work about the genogram, and I know you all are familiar. You guys have doctorates. I don't have it yet. But, in regards to genogram and just genealogy and traditions and patterns reoccurring over time through heritages and through the bloodline. And, I do it now, just listening to everyone. I look at my mother, and it's so crazy. Like I said, God throws those signs at me. It makes me feel so bad every day, because my mother and I will speak on Facebook. It's funny. We speak on Facebook, but then we call each other at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. But
The old and the new.
Yeah,
The old and the new.
she just got hip to it. But we'll speak on Facebook, and recently in the past week, she has now started opening up about how her stepfather beat her, and really had her wearing 3 outfits for the whole year, because that wasn't his biological daughter. He had 4 other kids with my grandmother, the one that was abused, and they did a whole drop her off in Philly, and they left and traveled the world and did all that with the other kids. But in the meantime, while she was in his care with my grandmother, he beat her, and she's been bringing that up in our conversation. My mom doesn't really disclose a lot of that, but knowing that and listening to this discussion, she was beat up by her stepfather. Then she, was dropped off at grandmom's house, whatever, was raised by my great-grandmother. She meets my father. My father and her have been together since 9th grade, got married at 18, 19. Then my father, some way, somehow, in that pattern, started hitting her. No, I did not witness it. My sister and I did not witness it when we were younger. But we did witness some of it when I was about 16, 17. He threw my mother across the floor. My mother's like 5 feet. My dad is like 6'3", and maybe about 200 or so 100 pounds. Threw her across the room because my sister was dating someone at the age of 20. She was dating somebody 34. You'd have thought, literally she would have been 16 the way he reacted about it. So that was my one knowing example of, it's still going on. He did this before. But where I'm getting at is that my dad got out of the whole "I beat you because I love you" because we got older, of course, and I got a little bigger, so it was like it's not as effective. But then my mother started spoiling me because she would beat me once or twice, but my dad was more of the chastiser or whatever. But then she started spoiling me. And my father moved up in the ladder, became CEO, stuff like that. And, would give me money, buy me things consistently. Well, now in my adulthood, that's where that finance comes in at. I don't really know how to manage my money well because I'm used to going on shopping sprees and getting what I want and things like that because we were able to afford it. So when I didn't have it as an adult, I put that pressure on myself. So that really wasn't even, that was some experience of childhood, but it was like me being an immature person because I was very much I knew what I was doing with those girls. When money was tight or whatever, I would take it out on them. Yeah. And I would act like a big baby and very immature, publicly embarrassing them, like dropping them off. I mean, literally on West River Drive, stopping the car, get out. And I would roll right out. And then when I would turn around and leave them, I'd be like, I lost control because I let them out that car. So now I want to go back. And then I actually, for my ex-girlfriend, she walked all the way. The new skateboarding park is near the art museum. She walked down that path. I actually jumped the curb with my car, and that's the stalking part. Yeah. That's that mental part. I didn't care about legality. I mean, have a whole degree, whole social worker, everything. I didn't care. Jumped the curb, drove the car right through the park after her.
I wonder, Lori makes a point around pathways and brain function and traumatizing oneself. And we stay in the trauma, I guess, because we're stuck in there. We can't get out of it, so to speak.
And she got in my car.
But you started to indicate that one of the ways in which you did get out of it was by intellectualizing the process and then refocusing your energy so that you could fill the space so that the car could drive, if I can go back to your analogy. And I'm wondering if that's the reason why people do stay in the relationship, because they really don't think it out, because it's so emotional, the experience, that they're stuck in the emotion. And if you know anything about the old brain and the new brain, that old brain, if it takes over, you're never going to get to the new brain. But the new brain is what needs to help you get that pathway going in a different direction. So I think maybe when you're stuck there because of the old brain, so to speak.
Or if you think about you're not using, if you're thinking of the new brain as being your cortex,
yes, right.
The part of your brain, that's what we need to think
your old brain's sitting
into
like this,
reason,
and the new
right?
brain's sitting on
Exactly.
that big mushroom.
Right.
So
Exactly. And we're not using this part, right? We're not reasoning it out. That's when we do our best work, when we're using that part of our brain.
You are stuck in this. I remember the first time it happened to me. And you were stuck in this
visceral brain.
Right, you were, what just happened?
Fight.
You were trying to grasp, you're trying to be in the moment. I mean, the first time it happened to me, it was date night, it was Friday night. We were casually saying, I remember standing in the mirror putting lipstick on. And he was sitting on the side of the bed and he was ready and we was like, are we going to Mexican? We had Chinese for lunch, maybe Italian. It was an easy exchange just like that, and I woke up on the floor. So it's that coming to going, where am I? How did this happen? And kind of putting two and two together, even though he's not saying anything. What happened, and then as a little bit of time passes, a couple of hours or whatever, you're realizing that this person who I've given my life to, I've exchanged vows with this person, just did this to me, and you're literally caught. And therefore, I don't have a medical term for it, a clinical term for it, but you're stuck in that, you're in shock. And you're trying to process that intellectually and emotionally.
And you can't because you're in fear.
Right.
You're in fear at that point. So your brain, you're not thinking with your cortex. You're not thinking with that good part of your brain. You're thinking with that lower part of your brain that's saying either you're freezing, you're fighting back, or you're
in love. I would say in love. I would say.
Oh, that too? You have
because
love,
a lot
hope?
of my friends, a lot of the girls that I dated, I even would sit there and be like, why is she still coming back, or why is she still here? I would even stare at them at night and just be like, wow, she's still here after this.
Maybe it is just a
but they
visceral
believe,
thing,
because you know what it is? It's kind of, what I perceive it is that they know who they met. And it's like, they could go back to that's the same person I met. That's not who this is. Like it's unreal. Like you said,
unreal.
it's unreal. It's not even happening. It's like a mirage.
It's this growth of a person
that you didn't know.
That if they go to therapy, they can get help
there it is.
in this growth can be taken away
Right.
because you still have this core person. But you said something. You said at some point you would look at them and go, why did they stay? Why are they still here? How did that change your behavior? How did that drive their abuse? Did you lose less respect from them in that manner?
It drove the abuse more because I knew I had them in the palm of my hand and I had control over this situation.
So it's an
More
power and
control and
control
power.
issue.
I had control. I mean, I was right. You basically justified me. You made me feel like I was right for what I did, or, I felt bad, but it was like being bipolar. I mean, maybe I am. I don't know, but it was more of like I felt bad, but I mean, I still got her.
Sure.
And how much were you more or less vested at that point in the relationship?
Oh, very,
Did that?
very vested. I mean,
But when that happened, when you made that, like, why are they staying here? Were you kind of repulsed by it? Did it grow the love? Was it kind of a mixture between the two?
very, very hurt by it. Very hurt by it. I mean, I would apologize consistently, but then that was the pattern that I was doing. And at times, I didn't even know I was doing a pattern. I
Right.
just really thought that I was apologizing. Here's some flowers. Here's my love. I'll do whatever it takes, this week. But then another week will come and, but at times, I've been very provoked at times. And sometimes I would sit back and be like, is it you or is it them? Because I would use go to the therapy sessions, what they stated, walk away, and I would walk away and I would be talked down upon so badly just walking away. You know what I mean? What, you gonna hit me? Always get that thrown in my face. What, you gonna hit me? And I'm like, that's not even what I want to do. And I'm like, why would you even go there? Like, no, I don't want to hit you. Let's just let it go. And I'd walk away. Yeah, all right. But you know what I mean? You wouldn't act like that if I hit you. It's like, come on, like, leave me alone. You know what I mean? And when I finally said, leave me alone, and I'm walking away, you're still attacking me. But those were words. But once again, is it domestic abuse and domestic violence? I would commit the domestic violence physically and all that, not belittling domestic violence, but the abuse of being told, what, are you going to hit me? No, I just want to, walk away. I actually walked away from one girl, and she actually came off the porch after me. I didn't hit her or nothing. I
Lori,
walked
can you
away.
speak to that, like
jumped in my car.
those patterns that
It's
she's
crazy.
describing between the two?
And I think what you're talking about is emotional. It's emotional abuse as well, right? I
Right.
mean, it's physical and emotional,
Verbal,
and
mental.
all of that is just as serious to
Yes,
people.
yes.
And I think that's what I'm hearing from you. And it
Yes.
gets very mixed up in a
Yes.
relationship. Relationships on a good day are really complicated,
Right.
let alone these kinds of relationships. And you're, talking about someone where one person is in terms of their history, what they carry with them, another person, what they carry with them, where you are in your brain states. Are you in that calm place? Are you in that fearful place and you're ready to run? I imagine somebody might say that because they are ready to run,
Right.
because they know maybe what you did the last time and they're like trying to get ready, like, what am I going to do?
Is that the
and
language
so-
when she said that her partner would say, what, are you going to hit me? Is that the language you're speaking of?
Right, right. So, like, that emotional piece of just trying to protect yourself, for what's going to come next. And maybe at that time you can think a little bit more reasonably. I know that when you think of, it's helpful to think about where people are in their brain states. From, you go from like calm to aroused to alarmed to fearful to terrorized. We have all of these brain states. And given where we are at any one time is going to be how we react,
Right.
And what we do. And when we're in that terrorized place, you're talking about it as old brain, right? We can't think at all.
Right.
We are
No
not
thought at
reasonable
all.
at all.
Something I just noticed when you were saying that your hand was coming down, where the terror is here. Was that just a coincidence?
No, not at all. So our cortex is up here.
Yeah.
This is where we think well. Our brainstem is here. And that's where we fight, we flee, or we freeze, right? So all in between there, it's kind of like that's because
It's like
this
the
is
lower
where we
kingdom.
think-
Yeah,
You
you
know
know what?
what I mean?
I say that
Like the lower
because
animals.
at some of the most traumatic times of my life in my relationship with my husband, it definitely feels though, emotionally you feel as though you're at your lowest. So I just connected with that.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think what you were referring to is that the higher functions are new brain
yeah,
functions.
yeah.
And I think, and what she was is going down the escalator, so
Right.
to speak, right?
Right.
And saying that when you get to this visceral level, it's just me and you, and it's a fight to the death, so to speak.
Right.
You know?
You're terrorized.
Yeah,
at
you're
that
terrorizing
point,
people,
right?
see?
So when you're terrorized, you're not thinking with any kind of
Right.
reason. You're not
Right.
doing pros and cons.
That's
and,
right,
You
yeah.
know, when
No, it was-
when
it
we're
was-
doing our good work in school
Right.
and all
That's
of those
right,
good things,
yeah,
we're
it's
thinking
true.
hopefully up here with our cortexes
Yeah.
because we're not afraid. However, people who continue to experience abuse sometimes never even get to this
Get there,
place. They never are able to be calm. So we're always kind of maybe walking around kind of hyper aroused, scanning our environments for what's going to come next, which is what I hear you saying.
Yes.
It's kind of like constantly in that kind of place, and nothing good is going to come from that,
Yeah,
right?
And Lori, would you agree that the reason why she identifies as a person in recovery from being a batterer is because her higher level functions took over to look, in other words, to see it and to realize that you don't want to be there. But this has to get you there,
Yes.
not this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And you're getting out of that rut. You're
Yes.
starting to look at it in a different way and saying, I want to beat that. I'm not sure what that is yet, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do something differently. I'm going to start revaluing maybe what I heard you talk a lot about the values growing up. So did you, Renee? Like all the values, all the things you were told. I'm going to start rescripting that for
Yes.
myself. I'm going to start
And
thinking
for
of
my
it
legacy,
differently.
yeah,
And
from my nephews. I mean, now my sister was blessed with two boys, and I definitely want that pattern to change. For the boys and girls. For the girls not to accept it, for the girls not to do it either, because I try to be very gender neutral when talking about domestic violence, because I don't want, because I've talked to, like I said, men that have been violated, in that way, and women as well, but. I really just want the message to be out there that domestic violence is a person. A domestic violence, a batterer, can also be a victim, but a batterer is a good friend of yours, the most popular person, because I'm very popular in my community, and in the LGBT community, and just being an advocate and stuff. Very popular in high school and college, and I'm about to have my own radio show, and I'm an entertainer and comedian. And James Brown used to beat his wife, Bill Withers as well, and a list of other entertainers that have done this, but you would only find out when they went to jail for it. You would only find out if the wife had made that phone call. So I want to come forward.
Made the phone call and then the press printed it.
Right,
Whether
absolutely.
it went anywhere.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they make a phone call and doesn't get printed.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I just want to show that domestic violence, a batterer, this is the face of one, and I've hung out with people and all that, and in various settings, and I just want them to understand that, yeah, I'm the comedian, I'm supposed to make, the world happy and all that, but it's like I carried my sadness through my hands and in my heavy heart in these relationships. And so when I get off the stage and I'm done making you laugh, what am I doing behind my closed door? And I want to open up that door and let everybody know this is what was going on. And it has to stop. I mean, I need it to stop. I don't want to sit at my cousin's house again and watch him go upstairs and argue with his girlfriend and, be about to hit her. And, we're sitting down there and I felt stupid that day just sitting there. My ex was with me and listening to that. And this was at a child's birthday party. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, and this is why people are out here going postal and murdering and things like that, because they're not tackling this issue head on, and they need to see a familiar face. You know what I mean? Not just the older guy or or the victim, lady or whatever. I mean, the faces comes in many shapes, forms, and sizes.
Lori, I want to ask you one question. Clinically, and I'll express maybe my own issue about this. Clinically, when I hear these stories, I often say to myself that the appropriate therapy is a cognitive behavioral approach. It's almost like an evidence-based kind of way of looking at the world. And it actually goes to the behaviors cognitively that then change the way you think about the world. And so some of the therapies in the past, like the general psychoanalytic theories, if you want to use those ones, just never worked. I mean, especially for this kind of a situation. They might have worked for other situations. But in this one, you almost, this whole dialectical therapy that's out there right now around meditation and the whole cognitive way of restructuring the way you think. See, because if we believe that you change the brain through the experience, then we'd have to get the brain to change to make the life a lot better. And the old therapy that I'm personally familiar with would be the cognitive behavioral approach. I think that's why Beck was so popular and so famous, so to speak. It really has a kind of evidence-based practice to it. And when they talk, you hear the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, don't you think?
Absolutely, you do.
Yeah,
And I think, what we see too at Women Against Abuse in the shelters is that the first step is just helping people to get safe, right?
Right.
Before we talk about any kind of therapy or whatever, just a place where you can finally not feel so terrorized or fearful, that you can start to think cognitive, you can start to use that part of your brain. And whether that takes women a day, 2 days, 2 weeks,
2 years.
a longer time than what they have in the shelter, right? Oftentimes.
And it takes a woman on average about 7 times to leave. And I
even leave.
experienced this at Women
Right.
Against Abuse.
Yes.
They never talk bad about the batter. They don't even discuss that. What can we do for you? That whole empowerment. That empowerment is what got me at some point later. I remember thinking to myself, just society's not there, my family's not there. I remember saying out loud, I'm going to have to be the only crazy person out here because everybody's telling me that this is okay. I'm going to have to be the crazy person because I can't deal with this anymore. And that's when you talk about the brain making that change, I remember that conscious decision that this is no longer okay. Everyone else is saying it is. I'm going to be the eyeball because I can't take it.
So if you think of it like a pathway story in the brain, it'll always, energy, I'm convinced, is circular in nature. You always get an opportunity to revisit your madness, so to speak.
Yes, indeed.
So I wonder sometimes that pathway is always there. So when we introduce these new brain structures, the cognitive approaches, we always have to make sure on the mantle that we see the domestic violence and the abuse, because in a given moment, 20 years later, a little bit like recovering from addiction, it's a similar story, is that something can tweak you right back to where you were, and cognitively, you then have to be in a position to say to yourself, I know this, I've been there before. But if you allow the old brain to take over, we call it relapse, we call it a lot of names, but you wind up back in where you were. So it's a constant loop and struggle throughout the rest of your life.
Yes.
But you want to know something? I'll tell you another story, and then I think everyone has those loops.
I was just going to
Everybody
say that.
has the loop. It's just this one is obvious that we could look at it, but your whole life is that way. Your whole life is, you think you make a correction in something, whether that being a good father or a good mother or whatever it is, and it loops back to wanting to be an evil one again. I mean, but the question is, you get better experiences, you can think it out more, you won't allow the emotion to control your life any longer, and then you loop out of it. But it always happens. And one of the problems in recovery is that they talk about the recovery as a linear process. It's not. It's a circular process. But life is more circular. I mean, that's why we have 4 seasons. That's why when we go to the moon, we go on an eclipse. We don't go on a straight shot. I mean, they're trying to tell us something. I mean, the Earth.
And we all have triggers. We all have triggers no matter what they are from. And that's what you've both talked so well about too, is when that happens, when we think we're doing well and all of a sudden, what was that trigger? It could have been a smell, it could have been
And sometimes the trigger is, it takes me back to a memory.
That's it.
That's traumatizing. But other times, even now, I live by a never again, never again. So it's little stuff like, what'd you give me coffee for? I specifically asked for tea. What does that mean? So that my defenses are on a survivor mode, kind of almost that never again spectrum, so that I look at things and what do they mean by that?
Right.
At some point, my daughter, who's 27, said, you see domestic violence everywhere. Because it's that never again. What does that mean? I mean, everything. So I look at all the signs and the history or whatever. So I'm always perhaps overanalyzing. I'm learning about myself. But it's little stuff, like literally the coffee and the tea.
But see, here's what I wanted to ask. This triggering and looping back is real important to not being an abuser, or is that I've noticed in a couple shows that I've been in with you and all, that you say to me, well, I don't like sometimes when people touch me, see, because it loops for you.
Right.
And I'm wondering over time, will the touching or the handshake or whatever it is.
The touching's fine. What I tell people straight on, if we're ever having an argument, don't touch me. Don't even
tou-
go,
yeah.
oh, you have something here.
Because you're afraid it'll go to.
Don't, oh, it's not going there. But
I know,
that's
but
my,
that's the fear.
But my brain says, oh, it's not going there.
Yeah, that's right.
You follow what
that's
I'm saying?
The cognitive
But
piece.
it's that I put that warning out there.
Right.
I know that that's a huge trigger for me.
Right.
If we're ever in an argument, don't even say, oh my God, there's something there. Oh my God, you just spilled coffee. Just let me be soaked in coffee.
I
But that's
Do not
part of
touch
your
me.
recovery,
Yeah,
right?
that is a
That is
part of it.
wonderful that you know that.
Yeah.
You know it and you can
That's how I am.
identify it.
That's how I am too when I converse with people, because sometimes, I'll converse and I'll move closer. And I've noticed that, that's the starting pattern. When there's a disagreement between myself and a female, whatever, that I'm dating, I'll move closer. Even when I do talk to people, I'm just moving closer. And I use my hands a lot. So now I'm learning a lot more to my proxemics when I'm speaking to someone. I keep that proper distance. When I have any disagreement and things, I learn to walk away or just let it go, or I'll just say okay. Okay now is like my favorite word, because I don't want to. It's not even just somebody getting me upset, because this is not a show for excuses. Like you stated, I mean, we talked about that. It's me, it is me. And so I have to know, like, okay, when to keep myself calm, when to take my time, because I've even though I've done radio and acting and all of that, I would get very anxious, and so I would have to, now I'm learning how to be more patient and slow down.
It's a lot of work.
Yes.
We have to kind of end the show, but it's kind of interesting. This ending today reminds me of when I did therapy. It's like all the good things seem to come out toward the end. And if I was going to write a DAP note, if you're familiar with data assessments and plan, I would put on my DAP note for the plan next week. We're going to start right here. So maybe we can say at the end of the show that we have a start for what we'll be working on, even though I won't see you next week.
Right.
And I won't bill you either.
Okay, please don't.
Well, that's all the time we have today for now. I want to thank my guest for joining me today, and I want to thank you for tuning in. You have been watching the Tapestry of Life show. I am Dr. Pascal Scholes, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services, Community College of Philadelphia. For more information, please contact us at the college. See you next time. Thanks.